Hello students and welcome to Extra Marks. Today we are going to talk about this very interesting and very important topic, that is nutrition. Okay, so the contents that we are going to cover in the session are criteria to identify living beings. Okay, so first we are going to find out what are living beings and how do we identify them. After that we are going to find out what are various life processes. And then we'll talk about what is the need for nutrition. We'll also talk about mode of nutrition, autotrophic nutrition, which will consist of photosynthesis. So we'll discover what photosynthesis actually is. And then we'll see the role of chlorophyll and carbon dioxide. And then we'll talk about heterotrophic nutrition, phagocytosis, and finally we'll discuss at the end of the session or towards the end of the session digestion in human beings. I hope you have understood what are we going to cover in this session and you are as excited and as interested as I am. So let's go and explore more about it. Right. So if we talk about how will you say that some organisms are living, how will you identify them? So probably we'll say that because these organisms, like in this case the dog and the cat, they are running or they are moving, we can say that they're living. But then my question will be, what about if they were not running and were actually sleeping? Will we still say that they are living? Yes, you will say. Why? Because they are breathing and we can see that they are breathing. But then what will we say if we talk about plants? How can you say that plants are living because we cannot see them breathing on? They are also not showing any kind of locomotion. Then we can say that they are green and then they are growing. Then what about the other plants which are not green or non-green plants? They are also living. How do we say that they are living? We will say growth, but some plants which show growth very slow or we cannot see their growth happening, then how will you say that they are living? We will say that there are certain molecular exchanges or molecular level changes that are continuously happening in them, and that is why they are called as living beings. Okay, and another thing we know is that living beings, they perform certain life processes which are very important. Now my question is, what are these life processes? So first we need to identify what all processes constitute of the processes that are called as life processes. So all these processes which are essential or necessary for the maintenance of life. For example, if we do not breathe for some time, we will die. If we will not eat, we will die after some time, right? So these are all processes. In absence of food, we are not going to survive, right? So they consist of nutrition, respiration, transportation, and excretion. Okay, I hope this is clear. So now answer this question. Is reproduction a life process? Okay, I'll give you 3 seconds to think. 3, 2, 1 and 0. Well, reproduction is not a life process. Now, why reproduction is not a life process? Simply because in the absence of reproduction, an organism still is going to live. Although we know that reproduction is important for the maintenance of the life on this planet, but for an individual, it is not required for the maintenance or survival of that individual. Right? So that is why reproduction is not considered as a life process. Okay, so now let's talk about certain modes of nutrition. But before that, understand that nutrition is the process of obtaining nourishment. We'll discuss that. But let's talk about how do we get food. Right? So we'll say that we get food from the market or plants. Right? So where do plants get their food from? And then we have our answer. The plants can make their own food by a simple process that is known as photosynthesis. And that is why these plants are called as autotrophs. Right? Now, what is the meaning of this word autotroph? Auto means self, and because they are able to make their own food, they are called as autotrophs. And on contrary, other organisms like us are known as heterotrophs because we depend on hetero means other organisms for our food requirements. Alright, I hope you understand this, that nutrition can be heterotrophic, which require a lot of enzymes for the digestion of the food, and autotrophs, which utilize simple material for production of energy and they make their own food. Right. So example of heterotrophs are, of course, we humans, animals, okay, and then some microorganisms, because a few microorganisms can also be autotrophic. For example, cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae, right? Then plants, of course, green plants. Okay, so when we say plants, we say green plants. They make their own food. Why? Because green plants have got the presence of chlorophyll in them. right? So we'll see what happens actually. Okay, so nutrition is a process. Okay, so by definition, nutrition is a process of obtaining nutrition, right, and or nourishment or energy. Okay, so it is done for obtaining nourishment or energy. Now, why is nourishment and energy required? They are required for the sustenance of life and health, and this all comes from where? From the food. So all the energy and nourishment comes from the food we eat. Now my question is, why do we need nutrition? Well, we need it for energy from the definition, right? We need energy. If we don't eat food, we will not feel energetic. We'll actually feel very lazy and lethargic. We need it for the growth. For children who are not able to get the right type of nourishment, the growth is stunted, right? For maintenance of our body, right? Then it provides us with the raw materials which make up many important things in the body, right? And then protection from the diseases. If you're not consuming good nutritious food, then your immunity is going to be low and the property or the power of the body to fight from the diseases will also be lowered. Then repair of the body. Now to repair the body, nutrition is definitely needed, and we know protein is involved in repair, okay, of the body. Now, autotrophic nutrition, as the name suggests, we're talking about green plants mostly over here, which are able to make their own food, right, from the simple molecules, and this process is known as photosynthesis. If we break down this word photosynthesis, we have two words. Photosynthesis. Photo means light, synthesis means to form or to produce. So in other words, literally it will mean to produce with the help of the light, right? So photosynthesis is a process in which autotrophs take in substances from outside and convert them into stored form of energy. Right? So they take up what? They take up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, water from the soil. These are the raw materials, very simple raw materials, inorganic substances, and convert them into carbohydrate and organic substance which has got carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. And this happens with the help of the sunlight, which is trapped by the chlorophyll present in the chloroplast. That is one of the cell organelles. Now, after converting it into carbohydrates like glucose, it forms a polymer and stores it in the form of starch. So, starch, in other words, is the stored form of the energy, right? I hope this is clear. So, plants, they perform photosynthesis and produce starch or store the energy in the form of the starch, right? Talking about photosynthesis, as you have seen, the raw materials are carbon dioxide, which comes from the air or atmosphere, water from the soil. So see, we know that carbon dioxide has got carbon and oxygen, water has hydrogen and oxygen, and carbohydrates, if we talk about, it has carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. So in other words, we can say that it is the reduction, that is addition of hydrogen into carbon dioxide to provide you with carbohydrates. Okay, so these are the carbohydrates. Other than carbohydrates, which are actually forming the source of all the food that all organisms consume on this planet, right? That means all food comes from this simple process of photosynthesis. Another important thing comes from photosynthesis. And what is that? Let me give you 3 seconds to think. 3, 2, 1 and 0. Exactly. That is oxygen. Right? So oxygen is also produced by this process, that is photosynthesis. So that means this process is so important for survival and for existence of life on our planet, right? And with that, water is also given out or in the form of water vapors or okay. So I hope this is clear. Okay. Now let's see what actually happens. So first step, if we say, is absorption of sunlight by chlorophyll. And where is chlorophyll present? In the thylakoid of the chloroplast. Okay. And what are these? These are cell organelles which are specifically present in the plant cell. So they have the sac-like structure called thylakoids, which have got the chlorophyll and they help trap the sunlight. So once the sunlight is trapped, now this sunlight energy or light energy is converted into chemical energy, right? Now, this chemical energy is utilized to break down the water molecule, also known as photolysis or hydrolysis, right? This is called splitting of water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. And finally, reduction of carbon dioxide to carbohydrate. So when we say reduction, it means addition of hydrogen. When we say oxidation, it means addition of oxygen. Okay, So these are the steps, and these might not take place one after the other. For example, in the desert plants, at night desert plants, they take up carbon dioxide. Why? Because they have to keep their stomatal pores open and the night, and if they do that in the morning, it's hot in the desert area and they're going to lose a lot of precious water, which is already scarce in the desert regions, right? So what they do, they open their stomatal pores and take in carbon dioxide during the night time so that water is not lost, and they create an intermediate product which is utilized in the daytime to produce starch or energy. I hope this is clear. Now, let's look at chlorophyll. Now, in science, you're not supposed to believe everything till the time they give the same answer or same result again and again. So, let's see. We have this plant which is croton. Okay, it has got variegated leaves. Now, variegated leaves are also present in money plant and other types of plants. So, now we're going to use this plant, and with the help of an experiment, we are going to see that is chlorophyll actually needed for photosynthesis? Okay, now, so variegated leaves, as I said, money plants and croton. This is a diagram of a croton. Okay, now, we destarch it. Destarch means what? Removal of starch. So, that will require 3 days in a dark room to keep the plant in for 3 days in the dark room. So, all the starch that is present and is, transported to all the other non-green plants as well is also removed from the plant, right? After that, what we do is we place it in sunlight for 6 hours so that again photosynthesis occurs and some starch is produced, but probably that starch should not move from the green area to other areas, right? Now, pluck the leaf of this plant and trace it on a paper. Okay, now we trace it on a paper so that we know what all parts are green. For example, this shaded region is green and the unshaded region is not green. Okay, so we will have a reference point, or you can also take a picture of the leaf, right? Now you need to boil this leaf. Why do we boil this leaf? So that no further photosynthesis occurs, enzymes are all deactivated or denatured. Then we need to immerse it in a beaker containing alcohol. Now alcohol is there for depigmenting or removing all the chlorophyll from the leaf. After this, the leaf will not appear green. It will be completely yellowish or transparent, right? Now we put it in a water bath so that excess of alcohol is also removed from the leaf, and then we perform the starch test. Now what is starch test? So for starch test we need iodine. So iodine has a specific property, that is its color is usually reddish brown or yellowish reddish brownish, right? And when it reacts with starch, it changes its colors to bluish black. Okay, yes. So if a substance has a starch in it, the color of the iodine will change to bluish black, but if it does not have it, then it's going to be yellowish brown. So you can look at these images. So this one has got yellowish brownish color because it has no starch in it, but this one has completely converted into bluish black because of the presence of starch, right? So if we take a leaf, like a variegated leaf, and we saw that earlier this leaf had some yellow regions and green regions, but after performing the iodine test, after all these steps, we noticed that all these regions which had chlorophyll before are actually showing the starch test positively, that is it has become blue-black, and the other region which was devoid of chlorophyll is not showing the positive starch test, or the iodine color has not changed. Now we can say that chlorophyll is essential for trapping the solar energy so that photosynthesis can take place. I hope this is clear. So now let's go ahead and explore more, and let's talk about carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is taken in by the small pores which are present on the leaves, known as stomatal pores. Also, the respiration or exchange of gases happens from other parts like stem, etc. with the help of lenticles and cuticles, but majorly it takes place through the stomatal pores which are present on the surface of the leaf, right? So as we discussed, it is done with the help of the stomata. So stomatal pore is this, and it has got these guard cells around it, right, which helps in opening and closing the stomata, right? So other parts also help in the exchange of gases. We have discussed that. So now it's time to see whether carbon dioxide is needed or not needed. So what we will do, we will take 2 bell jars, right? So they're called bell jars because they look like bell, right? Now in this bell jar, we'll keep potted plants. Let's label this one A and this one as B. In the A jar, let's add some potassium hydroxide, right? So we add some potassium hydroxide in this. Now, after adding potassium hydroxide in this, the carbon dioxide in bell jar is going to be subtracted. So there is going to be no carbon dioxide. Okay, so no carbon dioxide. Okay, none, I'll just write none. Okay, so there is no carbon dioxide over here, but over here carbon dioxide is present. So after this, after some time, we are going to take the leaves out from this plant, from each. Again, we are going to destarch it. After destarching it, we are going to treat it in the boiled water. Then we are going to add alcohol, and then we are going to run the starch test. Okay, so we will perform the iodine test, and what we are going to observe. What do you think? Will leaf in A and in B both show positive results with iodine test or no? I'll give you 5 seconds to think. Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and 0. Well, in pot B, right, or the pot in the bell jar B, the leaves are going to show a positive result with the starch test. Okay, positives because starch is present. Whereas in B or in A, there is going to be no photosynthesis as carbon dioxide is just not there. So it's not going to show the positive test with the iodine. So leaves color is going to be yellow brown, and in this case the leaves color is going to change to bluish black. Okay, with the iodine, or the iodine's color is going to change. Actually, it's the iodine's color that is going to change. We are going to see it at the leaf surface. I hope this is clear. Now, let's talk about the heterotrophic nutrition. So, heterotrophic nutrition can be divided into many forms, right? These are herbivores whose their diets are actually dependent upon the plants, grasses, etc. And examples are cows. Right? So cows, they depend on green plants or grasses basically. Then we have carnivores like tigers, right? Which eat other organisms. Then we have omnivores like man, like rat, like dogs. They can consume many plants and other organisms as well. Right? Then you have saprophytes, which feed on dead and decaying organisms, for example, many types of fungus or fungi, like mushrooms, right? And also you must have seen the bread mold. What it does is it secretes some enzyme on the substrate it wants to consume, digest this substance and then absorb it. Okay. After that we have parasites, right? Parasites, they depend on other organisms for their nourishment. So they harm the host body, but they are themselves benefited. Okay. Now, we are going to talk about phagocytosis. And what is phagocytosis? Phagocytosis is a process of how food or nourishment is taken by this very interesting organism, amoeba. Okay, and some other microorganisms as well. So, amoeba is a special unicellular microorganism that has got this irregular shape, right? It has got this shape, and when it sees food, how does it take in? Right, so it produces something known as pseudopodia. So what you see over here is pseudopodia. What is the meaning of pseudopodia? So pseudo means false and podia means feet. So false feet are basically helping in capturing the food. Okay, so they are ingesting. Okay, so next step what we see, they are completely trying to ingest it by, merging the cell membrane from both the sides. And over here we see that there is a food cup that is found, a cup-like structure which is also known as food cup. Okay, and then what happens next is a food vacuole, also known as phagosome, is created. Okay, so this you can say is ingestion or intake of food. Now, after that, what we see is lysosome. Okay, so this structure is lysosome. So, lysosome, what do they have? Again, they have the hydrolytic enzymes which helps in the digestion. So, they come and fuse with this phagosome and release their hydrolytic enzymes which help in the further digestion, that is break down into smaller molecules which then moves directly outside in the cytoplasm and then it is absorbed. Okay, so we can say over here digestion, absorption of the material in the cytoplasm, and assimilation, because it has to go wherever it is required, occurs, right? And finally, there is egestion. That is removal of the undigested food particles. Again, by dissolving of the cell membrane from one part and then it moves out of the cell, right? So these are the various steps of phagocytosis in the amoeba. I hope these are clear and very interesting as well. Now it's time that we talk about how does nutritional process or digestion takes place in the human beings. Alright, so where do you think the digestion starts? So, any idea? Yes, so digestion starts after we take in food or intake of food, which is also known as ingestion. Ingestion or also known as intake of food. Okay, so that is ingestion. And then where do you think digestion is starting? Yes, the digestion starts in the mouth itself, right? So what else is present in the mouth? So we know that mouth has got teeth. It is a cavity in which saliva is mixed with the food. The food is mechanically broken down. It's masticated with the saliva and converted into stuffed circular bolus, which then moves into the other parts. We'll discuss that. And if we talk about different types of teeth, so first we have incisors, which help in biting the food. Then we have canines, which help in tearing the food. And then we have premolars, which help in chewing. And molars also help in chewing, grinding the food so that it is broken down mechanically. And then let's talk about saliva and salivary glands. So salivary glands are again present in this region. We have sublingual glands, we have got mandibular glands, and we have parotid salivary glands which produce saliva. Saliva is produced around 1000 to 1500 ml on a regular basis, and the pH is around 6.8. After that, the content of water is 99%. It has got salt and mucus with it. Also, it produces a very important enzyme, which is salivary amylase. Now, this salivary amylase helps in the digestion of the carbohydrates. Okay. So, that means the digestion is starting in the mouth itself, and that too with the digestion of the carbohydrates, which is done by the salivary amylase. Okay, here I want you to introduce with a concept that enzymes, they are active only in certain pH range. Okay, so the pH that is provided by the mouth in the salivary, by the help of the salivary amylase, is optimum for the salivary amylase to act. Okay, so saliva is providing the optimum pH, so that salivary amylase could act on the substrate, right? Now, if we talk about where does the food go from here? So, from here, it goes to pharynx. Pharynx is that region where your nostrils and food cavities converge, and there is presence of epiglottis, a flap-like structure which regulates the movement of the food, and it ensures that the food is going into the food pipe, which is also known as esophagus, and wind enters your windpipe, which is known as trachea. The trachea is this windpipe which has got the C-shaped cartilaginous ring structure, and then that is why it is also suggested not to speak while you eat or eat while you speak, otherwise this flap can get confused and the food, instead of going into the esophagus, can enter the windpipe and choke it, right? So remember that. Now, from here, right, food we know that goes from mouth, it goes to the esophagus. Esophagus is very interesting. It's elastic, and then it performs a process which is known as peristalsis, which is the rhythmic contraction and expansion of the esophagus. So this bolus can move ahead. Now, bolus we have discussed is what? It's the food which has been mechanically broken down, chewed, made soft and mixed with saliva and converted into this circular structure. Now, from here, it is going to move somewhere. So, from mouth to the esophagus, and now what do you think it is going to go into? Yes, it's going to enter your stomach, right? So, esophagus is flexible, it aids peristalsis, and another important fact there is that no enzyme is secreted in the esophagus, right? Now, from here it enters your stomach. So, mouth, stomach. But to enter inside the stomach, there is a sphincter known as cardiac sphincter that is present. It's like a door that opens in one direction and makes sure that the food is moving forward in the stomach and not the backward side. That is, the food doesn't start moving towards the esophagus, right? So that is your cardiac sphincter. And then the stomach lining also produces some special substances which we are going to discuss. But there is another sphincter or a structure which is known as pylorus that also regulates the movement of the food into exit of the food from the stomach, right? So when the food stays in your stomach for 3-4 hours, it is converted into chyme, and now chyme is acidic. So first talk about stomach. Stomach is an elastic bag again, and it has got pylorus, which we are going to discuss, and a cardiac sphincter, which we have discussed, right? So it's an elastic bag and it has got an inner lining which produces gastric juice. Now this gastric juice is acidic liquid, right, and contains certain things. What it contains? It consists of water, some salts, hydrochloric acid. Now purpose of hydrochloric acid is very interesting and important. So first it kills pathogens or microorganisms that might have entered, and second is that it gives the acidic pH, that is an optimum pH range for other enzymes to be active. Acidic, so it makes the medium acidic, right? So enzyme is pepsin, and pepsin is initially in the form of pepsinogen, which is inactive form, and then it is converted into pepsin, and pepsin helps in the digestion of proteins. Okay, what are the building blocks of proteins? Let me give you 3 seconds to think. 3, 2, 1 and 0. That is amino acids. So amino acids, they combine to form peptides, and then peptides form the larger proteins. Then there is mucus. Now mucus forms the lining of the stomach and prevents or protects it from the action of the HCl. Right. After that, we should know what chyme is. So as discussed, chyme, when the food stays in the stomach for 3 hours, it becomes acidic and it is a little bit digested. It's chyme. So we also see that digestion which had started in the mouth with the digestion with the help of salivary amylase and digestion of the carbohydrates. Now the digestion of protein has started in the stomach. Now from stomach through the pylorus, it's going to enter into small intestine, right? So small intestine is not small at all. It is 7 meters long, right? 2.5 centimeters wide. And it is coiled and highly folded in the abdomen so as to increase the surface area so that movement or digestion of the substances can take place. Right, it has 3 sub-regions which we are going to discuss, and then it serves both digestion and absorption. So you can also say that 90% of digestion and absorption occurs over here with the help of the villi, right, which are finger-like projections. Okay, so now food has entered from the mouth to the esophagus, stomach, and now in the small intestine. And the villi are there, which are finger-like projections, and they have got thin blood vessels and lymphatic vessels with them, which help in the absorption of the digested food, and also they take away the digested molecules to the target regions for the assimilation to take place, right? Now, different parts of small intestine are duodenum. So, duodenum is the first part that is going to be there from the stomach, then jejunum, and then finally ileum. Small intestine receives digestive juices in the duodenum, and that is from 2 glands: liver, which secretes bile juice, pancreas, that secrete pancreatic juice. So in the duodenum we get the secretions, right? So bile juice, which is produced by the liver, pancreatic juice by the pancreas, and we also have the intestinal juice that is secreted by the intestine, small ones, right? Talking about the functions of the bile juice. So bile helps in the emulsification of the fats. That is, bigger fat globules are converted into smaller ones, right? So that more surface area is made available for the action of the enzymes, right? As we know that in the stomach, the chyme became acidic, and then it needs to be converted into alkaline chyme, and we know this happens for this one very simple reason, that enzymes, they are more active in the optimum range of the pH, right? So now we have pancreatic juice, and it provides us trypsinogen, which is the inactive form of the trypsin. So it is converted into trypsin, which is active. So we can write this is inactive. This is active. It becomes active with the help of enterokinase. And now proteins are acted upon by trypsin to provide you amino acids, right? That is, it has any digestion of proteins. Leftover starch, as salivary amylase was already acting, is acted upon by other amylase to produce maltose. Emulsified fats are acted upon by lipases to give you fatty acids and glycerol. So all these are building blocks of these substrates. Intestinal juice, they help in the digestion of peptides, and the name of the enzyme is very simple, peptidase. Right, so peptide is acted upon by peptidase enzyme and gives you amino acids. Maltose is again acted by the enzyme maltase and gives you glucose. After that, we have sucrose acted upon by sucrase to give you glucose and fructose. Then we have lactose, which is acted upon by lactase to give you glucose and galactose. Right. Then you have emulsified fats, which are converted with the help of the lipase into fatty acids and glycerol. I hope this is clear. Now, let's talk about what happens in the large intestine. Right. So, large intestine has got this part known as caecum, colon and rectum, and it also helps in absorption. So, majorly absorption is taking place. Now, no enzyme is secreted over here, just like in the esophagus, and now the semi-solid waste, that is feces, are created over here, and the process of removal of this undigested waste is known as egestion, right? Defecation, and we'll talk about that also, right? So we have seen here that the food enters in the stomach, then in the small intestine, moves ahead, then it enters in the caecum. We have this longitudinal transverse, so ascending, transverse and descending colon. So ascending colon, transverse colon and descending colon, and then finally it moves out through the rectum and anus. Okay, so I hope this is clear about the large intestine and what happens over here. Now, final step is the removal of the undigested waste from the body, that is known as egestion. Okay, so what we have discussed, it's kind of what we have discussed. We definitely discussed about plants, but let's just first talk about ingestion. That is very simple, intake of food. Okay, so intake of food happens. After ingestion, what happens? What is the next step? So we've taken food. Now the digestion of the food starts in the mouth itself. So the next step is digestion. Now, majority of the digestion, it takes place in your small intestine, that is 90%. And if we talk about where does the digestion of carbohydrates start, it's simple, in the mouth. Where does the digestion of the proteins start? It starts in the stomach with the enzyme pepsin. And then fats are also digested with the help of the bile juices and lipases in your small intestine. Okay, now after the digestion, right, and we know that 90% of the digestion and absorption occurs in the small intestine. Okay, and what do small intestine help that helps in the absorption? That is your villi or finger-like projections, which have got the blood vessels and lymphatic vessels, right? And now what happens next is that, yeah, they absorb it and then they help in taking them to the targeted region, right? So now when it reaches the targeted region, over there it starts to assimilate. For example, proteins will be targeted to your muscles so that build up, growth and repair occurs. Alright, so that is your assimilation. Now after assimilation, in your large intestine, water is also absorbed, right? And then what is left is semi-solid waste, right, which is also known as feces, and they are defecated out in the process known as egestion. Okay, with that we also discussed about nutrition in the plants, and we talked about photosynthesis. And what is photosynthesis? So photosynthesis is a process in which a plant uses simpler molecules like carbon dioxide and water to give you what? To give you carbohydrates or starch, right? And in this process also oxygen is produced, right? So we get starch, we get oxygen by the process of photosynthesis. We also discussed about amoeba and other organisms. So what do? They perform phagocytosis. Well, phagocytosis also occurs by WBCs in our body. So, but here we are going to talk about the amoeba only. Okay, and we know that in this, the pseudopodia of false feeds are generated, which help in the ingestion of the food and so on. Right, I hope this is clear. Right, so the digestion in human beings, Digestion in plants, digestion in amoeba, or the process of nutrition or obtaining nourishment and energy for the sustenance of life process by the help of the food. That is your nutrition. We also have understood that nutrition is required for our energy requirements, for a growth, for a repair. They also serve as precursors for a lot of substances to be formed in the body, and they protect the body from the infection. So I hope this is clear. So now let's go ahead and try and solve a few examples or questions. So first is, what is autotrophic mode of nutrition? Now I'll give you 3 seconds to think over it and answer me. 3, 2, 1 and 0. So autotrophic mode of nutrition is that mode of nutrition in which the organism is able to make its own food, right? So autotrophic nutrition is basically, auto means self, right? Auto means self, and trophic means to have more nutrition. So all those organisms which are able to make their own food are known as autotrophs, and in this mode of nutrition the plant is making its own food, like green plants. The example is green plants. They make their own food. Why? Because they have got the chlorophyll, and this chlorophyll is present inside the chloroplast, which helps trap the sunlight, and over here they utilize simpler molecules like carbon dioxide and water molecules, and then convert it into carbohydrate, oxygen, water vapors, right? So it's a very important process, so you can write it. And other examples of this are cyanobacteria or blue-green algae. I hope this is clear. Now let's try another one. What is autotrophic mode of nutrition? We have discussed this. Now explain the role of HCl in stomach, right? So what is the role of HCl in stomach? This is now very important. So HCl, which is also hydrochloric acid, right? So hydrochloric acid helps in 2 ways, right? Firstly, it provides the acidic environment. Now this acidic environment, right, helps in the activation of certain enzymes like pepsin. And pepsin helps in the digestion of proteins. Right, this is one thing. Second thing that HCl does is it kills the microorganisms which might have entered the gut, right? So it kills the microorganisms, so it performs these functions. So this is the role of HCl. And can you think of other roles of HCl? Yeah, so it provides the acidic medium so that it becomes so that the enzyme is active, and pepsin could digest the protein, and also it kills the other microorganisms, right? So this is the role of HCl. And what protects the stomach lining from the action of HCl? That is mucus, right? I hope this is clear. Now let's go ahead and try another one. Name and describe the role of digestive enzymes. So this is very important. So different glands, right, secrete different enzymes. So what are different glands? Let's just talk about salivary glands. Then we have liver, right? Then you have pancreas. After that you have your small intestine. Okay, I'm just writing that. So salivary glands, they produce salivary amylase, which helps in the digestion of the carbohydrates. So I'll just write amylase, right? And this helps in the digestion of carbohydrates, right? After that we have liver, which secretes bile juice. Bile juice has bile salts, etc., which helps in the emulsification of the fats. And then you have pancreas, which have got trypsin, lipases, etc., to help the digestion of proteins, fats, etc. Small intestine also has got these enzymes like peptidases, sucrases, lactases, galactases, which help in the, and maltases as well, which helps in the breakdown of different types of carbohydrates, proteins and fats. Okay, so that means complete digestion is occurring. You can always form a table for quick reference, right? So I hope you have understood all the things that we have talked about, and you now started appreciating the process of nutrition that takes place and helps in our survival, and you've enjoyed the session and you have learned something new. Thank you so much.